Great. So my name is Isabel. I'm one of the program chairs of this conference. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to give you a welcome for the second day of our conference. So before moving forward, we wanted to share with you some things that happened already in LAK23. Here you can see some pictures of what the opening session was. And I would like to thank again UTA for hosting us and having us here, to the ones that are face-to-face, and for the ones online, doing our best in order to connect and keep everyone engaged. And we also had, in addition to our opening session, we had presentation sessions, we have the poster and demo firehouse, which was exciting, and we also had more activities, even online. There were regional meetups, people hanging out in other town, and also in pool. Still, what you might know or you might anticipate, learning analytics is about learning, in addition to data, technologies, and other things that we have been watching throughout the session presentations. And regarding learning, there are some lessons learned that we captured early on. For example, one of those lessons learned is about the preferred Wi-Fi that everyone here that is face-to-face can keep connected. So the preferred one is UTA Guest. Everyone's still available, but we keep suggesting so that you use UTA Guest, and the only thing that it will request is your name and email, so you can engage also in online activities. Also, something that we have learned and we want to encourage even more is to download the Cuba app. We're using Cuba for all participants, both online and face-to-face, in order to give and deliver important announcements, so we keep connected. Also, you can watch sessions later on, like review the questions and answers. You can access sessions. It's a good way to keep track of their agenda. And also, you can message other participants, create meetups, and all those things will be reflected in your this meeting board that it's like it has a thread. So we encourage you to share photos and your discussions so we keep everyone engaged. And in those lines, also to facilitate presentation sessions, we also want to encourage everyone, both face-to-face and online participants, to post their questions in the Q&A function within Google. This will help everyone to keep track of the question and answer, and also our session chairs. So even for these sessions, for the ones who are here, you can log into the welcome for the Thursday agenda. And if you want to post comments, we will be keeping track of that during the session. So, and for forward sessions, keep this in mind. Please post your questions and answer your questions in Google. Also, we know that there are more lessons to be learned, and we want to invite you to talk to us, to give us feedback. This is, regardless, we have had this conference for several years. This is our first hybrid conference, and we're learning throughout the process, and we think the community is also about that. So there are multiple ways in which you can give us feedback. One thing would be to ask Solar executive member, and one of those, you might see some of them wearing these t-shirts. I'm not wearing it right now, I might wear it later. So if you see someone with this t-shirt, you can have a conversation about things that you have think that could be improved or things that are going well. Also, you can speak to people that are part of this year's LAK organizing team, and you will see people with this t-shirt. So you can talk to, and you can talk to anyone, but just to let us know if you want to have like a quick conversation. Also, at the end of the conference, there's going to be a survey, and we're looking forward to that data. So please be generous with your time, all participants, local LAK participants, and let us know how your experience went through, what things you would like to highlight, what things you expect to be improved. And also, there is a research project related to these type of experiences, and I will share this slide. I was also sharing in the opening. If anyone now wants to grab their QR or their cameras, just have a reflection about how the conference experience is going through, please do that. And doing this, let's go over. I would like to invite Hiroki to the podium.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. Actually, this is my. This presentation since 2013 year. So I hope the same presentation next year. That is the basic information for activity. Oh yeah, the data is already fixed, and the venue is Kyoto, the National Conference Center. Yeah. So already you are already announced and you can information on the webpage. And here is the organizing committee member. Yeah, we have for organizing committee and also program chief. Yeah. So this is a venue. And so here is the official hotel. Next to the venue, yeah. And also, yeah, so this is important when this is a Sakura series. Yeah, so when you do this, you come to Kyoto, yeah, I recommend you to your hotel. And let me show you a video.
our current run. We're so glad, we're so looking forward to being in Kyoto. And talking about being here, I want to anticipate what you might expect for today. So we have activities. We have our first LAK debate. This is an innovation for this year. We have been really innovative in this version of the conference. And also, we have the solar AGM, our annual general meeting over lunch. In the afternoon, there will be the poster and demo session online in the other town, and also have our conference dinner. And then, well, third day, don't forget, we also have our award ceremony, so stay tuned. And also we have our other keynote and closing sessions. So about the other town, one piece of like having this conference really hybrid is to expand our community. This is something really important for SOLA, but I believe that for the learning analytics community overall. So it is important that as we also engage in the poster and demo firehouse, we also engage with the other town later on. So please connect. You will find a tab within HUBA where it says Gather Town. I'm going to point it out there. So you can access there and you will ask for a password. And that password is LAK. And how you go? I go. I said 2023. So the information is already there. Any questions you can ask us, but the invitation is to engage so we can both face-to-face and online participants have another glance to the posters and demos. And remember that you can vote for the best poster and demo. And about our conference dinner. So we have your back. We have some changes regarding the weather. I don't know if you have been checking the weather, maybe you have. If you don't, well, we're like taking care of it. So we have changed the venue because in order to keep you warm, but the good thing is it's still in Texas Live, we have still the same band, it's just a different restaurant. And the important thing is to like everyone to be dry and warmer so you can enjoy. Quick announcements for those that are not going to the dinner, there will be buses after the online poster session. So you're going to, for example, use the Wi-Fi here to connect in the other town and then take the shuttle back to your hotels. And for those who are going to the conference dinner, there will also be a bus that goes to the restaurant. So please pay attention to the last signs, don't get confused. Maybe you will end going back to a hotel when you want to enjoy the conference dinner, but we will be there to assist you. So we invite everyone to join. Also, well, I don't know if you know this, I'm Chilean. As Chileans, we're like world-known experts about natural events. Not necessarily events that happen in this area, but one important lesson that we have learned as Chileans is that you need to you always need to keep people informed and aware of things that can happen. So if there is any notification, it's important to keep calm and also to know that the infrastructure so keep away from the classrooms, as I said, but the important is to keep calm and stay informed and also be aware of people who might be guiding us in case of any emergency. That being said, we will going to introduce our next activity, which is the LAK Day, and in order to do that, I would like to invite Mark.
Third attempt at Kyoto. You are really persistent, and let's hope that we will be there next year. And I'm so much looking forward to that. And that will be fantastic. So the debate is an experiment. We don't know what, but I'm sure there'll be lots of fun. So the debate, we will have two opposing sides. Isabel will explain a little more about this, but it's all about predictive learning analytics. Since LAK 2011, a lot of researchers and practitioners and policymakers have started to think about predictive learning analytics. And it basically, as we all know, it incorporates a wide range of data to try to understand which students are going to do well and which students are not doing so well. So for example, Nottingham Trent has an app, and that app basically is given directly to students so they can see whether they're doing well. At my own university, our 7,000 teachers basically can see how their 200,000 students are doing, and they get amazing traffic light systems. I'm a huge fan. But there are some people who are really worried about this in terms of whether we should be able to identify these learners, should we do it in the first place, could we potentially discriminate learners, are there learners that we might be missing, how accurate are our algorithms? And today's debate is a kind of summary perhaps of 11 years of research at LAK. And we have some really amazing researchers as well today. And just to be sure, we're all playing a kind of role. We're acting, right? So if a person acts as, oh, this is the worst thing ever, and maybe that person intrinsically believes it's actually good, but it's about a debate. And we welcome your thoughts. So go to Ruba, if you have not been there. Post your comments and questions, because we will actively involve both those who are online and those who are here. So who are we actually bringing in today?
Okay, so I will tell you more about that, but before that, in order to keep the suspense, we will talk about the form. So we will have two teams. One will be supporting the motion, and one will be opposing it. And each debater will have 8 minutes to present. So as Bart said, they will be playing a role. There might be coincidence in what they believe and what they are arguing or not. But the thing is that for the sake of the debate and this exercise, they will still be representing us. So interpret those motions out and react and use Cuba as Bart has said. We can move forward to the other session. I'm giving a heads up to the people at the back, because then everyone has to move from Cuba. We have this welcome, and then there is the next session.
Same way.
Ah, it's the same one? Oh, okay. That's good. Okay. No, forget what I had said. People might don't get confused. Wherever you are in Cuba, this is the welcome presentation. There you can pose your questions and answers. And for the people that are in the room, you can do that as well. So there will be time to engage with the audience at the end of the debate, but we also will have extended time after the coffee break so we can keep a discussion about the topic. And now, okay, after that explanation, I will introduce the debaters. So for Team Affirmative, we have Dragan Vasiljevic. He is a distinguished professor of learning analytics in the Faculty of Information and Technology and the director of the Center for Learning Analytics at Monash University. His research interests in learning analytics center around the development of computational and design methods that can enhance understanding of server-related collaborative learning. You know he has many prestigious awards. Recently, Dragan received a 2022 ACM Distinguished Members Award for Outstanding Educational Contributions to Computing. Thank you, Dragan, for being here. A warm applause and look forward. Our next participant in Team Affirmative is Kaylin Mills. She's an assistant professor of educational psychology and co-director of learning informatics lab at the University of Minnesota. Her research interests include the antecedents and consequences of mind wandering, the influence of affective states and information processes, and engagement and disengagement during complex learning. Thank you, please, for joining us. Okay, moving from Team Affirmative to Team Negative. So, Tia, I want to introduce your question. But you can see the people there. So she's a professor of learning technologies and social justice at the Open University UK. She has expertise in the design and evaluation of learning technologies that promote education opportunity and social justice, including learning analytics dashboards, online citizen science websites, and mobile game applications. She's the academic colleague of the Early Alert Indicators Project, a university-wide initiative that uses predictive learning analytics to identify and support students who are struggling with their studies through early teacher interventions. She has received loan funding from Horizon Europe to devise sustainable models of formal educational technology that are based on co-production, design thinking, and emerging digital technologies. She's an author of more than 110 outputs, the Great Majority of Teaching Theory Journal. She's a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy and an elected member of the International Society for Artificial Intelligence in Education. Thank you, Tia. Okay, and last but not least, we would like to welcome Danielle Navarra. She's a professor in the Department of Psychology and Executive Director of the Learning Engineering Institute at Arizona State University. She's an expert in the fields of cognitive and learning sciences, comprehension, writing, natural language processing, intelligence tutoring, and artificial intelligence in education. She has led the development and testing of multiple LLM tools that have been used in various contexts and learning environments, involving essay writing, reading comprehension, second language learning, and creativity. Thank you, Daniel, for being here, and thank you for all those people. And we have the order to have the here. Okay.
So we're going to do a kind of interactive online face-to-face old-school session. So there will be a quick poll, and I'm sure you've already thought about this question really deeply. So you can either by raising your hand or go to the particular Menti tool. And how do we get to the Menti tool? So if you want, for those who are online, you can go to menti.com with the code 28945032, or you can do it the old school way and just raise your hand. That's the old school way, but you can do it online or you can do it old school way. You can see the things already moving. So let's do it. Perhaps you can vote twice. So the question, let's do it. Who thinks that predictive learning analytics does more harm than good? Just raise your hand. So a couple of people in the room think predictive learning analytics does more harm than good. Okay? Who thinks, and you can only vote yes or no, there's no in between, there's no in between. Who thinks that predictive learning analytics actually does not harm, or does more good than harm? Okay, so this is an early prediction.
I have a clarification question. Is the winner determined on the percent change? Or?
Yes, the winner.
Yes, but it has to be statistically significant.
The winner.
I invite everyone to vote for yes now. To get the significance.
The winner will, of course, be the one who has the most changed votes, who has the most swing states.
Keep those.
So maybe we can, do we want to explain the format a little bit?
Okay. So, okay. So as we mentioned earlier, each debater has 8 minutes. And now they have the challenge. We did this quick initial poll, but it might change. Who knows? That's kind of like the exciting piece of the debate. So we will give 8 minutes each. We will time it. So I can let you know when there's 1 minute remaining, like raising my hand, and then I will just say time is up. Yeah, like in the news when like politics. Okay. So the first one to have his 8 minutes will be Dragan, then will be followed by Pia, then Kaylee, and then Danielle, and then with like people, please, if you have like burning questions, comments, reactions. Obviously, we expect also the room to react, but also for those that are online and also the ones face to face, you can also react because maybe you want to keep your opinion to yourself, or if you want to like give some, like anticipate some questions, use the Google app, we will keep track of that. Having that said, we have I have something time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Dragan, you have to turn your microphone on.
Is it good?
Can you hear that?
Yeah, all right.
For those online, there's a separate setting, and that's basically what that thing is. Yeah. So it's just leave there. It should pick up
Just
the sound.
to leave it there, okay.
And the same for Daniela and Tia. Basically, just have to turn on that big mic that's lying in front of you somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dragan, your 8 minutes starts now.
All right, thanks. For those who don't understand what affirm means, which we didn't yesterday, we are the doom and gloom brigade here. So I would be generally happy with this to be the first in many cases, but the prediction is in research on debates is that those who start first are the usually punching bag. So the thought of being a punching bag and the prediction of that didn't really do me much good last night. But you may say, well, I'm just weak and I'm just really kind of easily influenced by the external forces. And so what research tells us about that? 2015, I had a really good host, Nikola Pechenitsky, visiting me when I was still in the University of Edinburgh, and he developed a brand new predictive model of the students enrolling into computer science degrees. And they basically identified risk factors for students enrolling into those degrees. And can you imagine which risk factor would be that? It would be being a woman, simply because most of the people in computer science are sadly men.
And then they basically did a simulation, and the research showed that if they delegated the entire decision power to the predictive model over the course of a few years, women's presence in computer science would be eradicated. So good on predictive models. Then the second example, you can say, well, this is a simulated example. Does this happen in reality? Well, it does. There's research, and there's a really important book that is written by Cathy O'Neill about weapons of math distractions. She cites some examples. So some of these examples come precisely from education. The first two examples come from education, where predictive models are used to predict students who are coming to either a med school or to get a loan for education. Predictive models would decline them solely on the presence of their zip code, meaning that in most of cases, zip code is a really good proxy of socioeconomic status, and sometimes even on the racial levels that are available. And these are the real world examples. So you can say, well, these are really some irresponsible examples, but that surely cannot happen to teachers and places like that. Similar example was cited at the same place about teachers who are fired by schools simply because their performance, that is to say the performance of their students in the class, would be lower than the performance predicted by the model. Although there would not be any correlation of the teacher's difference with the predictive model across the many years. Meaning that in many cases, predictive model would be influencing who would be fired or not purely by chance. And the final good example that comes, well, set example that comes is done at Thea's home turf in the UK last year. The UK Department of Education decided to use a predictive model to give students grades on their A levels, solely purely based on the prediction. And some estimate says that about 40% of the kids got lower grades than they actually deserved, without clear any notion of the transparency how these models did. So these are some of the really examples. I'm sure the other side is going to say predictive models are so cuddly. They are really so doing great in one institution in the world. And perhaps they do. But I'm yet to see other higher education institutions to replicate their model, because they have a very specific mission. They are very committed to that, and they also have a very specific type of data in the users. But we also know examples. A best paper nominee in 2017, led by Shane Dawson at this very conference, presented a paper in which he showed the results in which the institution invested more than a couple of million Australian dollars in an initiative to support student retention based on the predictive model with a null effect. Those 2 million could have been used for some other better purposes. It's a wasted resource in an institution potentially that is having students who are suffering from lower levels of socioeconomic status. Also 2015 at this conference, we had a Moneyball metaphor, beautiful, nicely polished keynote talking us how we should be following the same metaphor. But the book, Weapons of Mass Distraction, tell us something different. First of all, models in education, especially provided by the proprietary organizations, are not transparent. The second problem is that in most of our cases, our models are really not statistically rigorous, meaning that we don't have large amounts of good quality data. And when I say that, in 2016, we wrote a paper in which we said one size fits all doesn't work in learning analytics. And in that paper, we showed that we cannot really generalize predictive models going from one course to another course to another course. We cannot even generalize it to the same course if we change the course design, meaning that we are going to ask students to do something in many courses based on a least common denominator, and in many cases, that's just the number of logins. So what good can that do to the students, except to actually force them to do more clicking inside the system and potentially to game the system to show certain desirable behavior. The other thing is we also had a paper 2021, which tracked 25 courses in a single degree program, which generally had a same nominal pedagogical design, problem-based learning, medical degree. We were trying to predict and explain the extent to which the grades of the students would be best explained by the best engineered features, what we know about the theory, based on their learning strategies, based on their time management, and so on, and also based on the random models. Beautiful features explain about 8%, while about 60% of the variance in the outcome was explained by the randomness. So what we want to say is that most of our data are really incapable to explain the dynamic nature of learning and the dynamic nature of our learners as well, and the changes that are happening across many of us. In many cases, imagine that you are listening my point and hearing every every 100 or 1,000 character I'm saying. My debate point would be CWM. So good debate for me, and that's what happens in many of the predictive models. The other important problem is that why Moneyball doesn't apply in our cases, because our models are not continually updating. We don't have continuous updates on the data about our students. In many cases, the problem of continual learning in machine learning is a big problem. Is that the end? All right. So I get these 30 seconds now back. Sorry, but it's on you, mate, there. So our models are not continually being updated, and we can't know what is happening. It's a hard machine learning problem. It's an open challenge as well, and we cannot easily expect that to happen. The final point I want to make about predictive models is that we all know that predictive modeling is always biased, simply because it represents a societal and other structural biases. Well, you can say, well, we have beautiful examples of the metrics we can measure the bias. 2019 paper by George Gardner and Chris Brooks demonstrated we can measure bias. We even have a paper at this conference demonstrating about 20 metrics. But how many technology providers are providing the measures of bias when they are coming to that? Or how many institutions are measuring that bias when they are also reporting the accuracy of their models? I don't think many. And I see an intrinsic conflict of interest for many of the institutions that are providing these models, especially organizations, to report on the bias, simply because they want to make their models opaque, simply because that's their business proprietary value, and they don't want to disclose it. And the final point I want to make, want to share here is with respect to the bias itself. Well, we can say that, we can still take care of the bias. And indeed, we, as researchers, may take care of lots of bias.
That's 8 minutes gone. Thank you very much for your point. Let's go to the opposing side. Professor.
Can I start?
Of course. 8 minutes.
Thank you. I have my timer as well, just to make sure you're not cheating.
Very good.
So if we make it at the Open University, then all of you can make it work, Dragon. Many organizations invest significant resources to ensure that data on predictive analytics is accurate and unbiased. How they do that? They use advanced data cleaning techniques. They use diverse data sets to reduce bias. They are using analytic models that are designed to detect and correct for bias. They may not be 100% accurate, of course, but they can still inform how we design better courses and how we can support students at risk, contributing to improved learning outcomes. Yes, they can be specific, but at the same time, they can also be generic. They can be tailored to specific students and educational contexts, trained on specific sources available and specific ways of teaching. Yet, they can be also customized to the needs of specific institutions. The potential of big data allows at the same time those models to be trained to be adaptable and transferable to different contexts. They can be trained on data from multiple contexts and populations, creating robust models that are able to identify trends and patterns across different contexts. PLA, predictive analytics, are not just about patterns of previous data or clicking behavior we often hear about. They can identify patterns and correlations and let us know of which courses or sections of a course do not work well for students, or students find particularly challenging. Then we can make changes and improvements to our learning design and teaching approach. They can also identify students at risk of failing based on previous performance and other measures. What does this mean? That teachers can tell who may fail and can provide in-time support before they fail, saving students and giving them an opportunity to progress and complete their studies. It's about educators and people making informed decisions about those models that can improve the overall quality of education. And of course, And yes, of course, at the Open University, you have several studies that show that when teachers are actually using those models, are less likely to have students that can pass their courses. So you can see there the impact this can have on students' performance. We often assume that our students do not want to be monitored. Yet again, our studies, and not only our studies at the Open University, they show that students, they have no problem if their teachers know and have access to the data, and they do something to help them. They even ask for access to what we call in the community prescriptive data analytics. So they want to know what to do to get better and manage, for example, to submit an assignment. Technically, a well-designed model meets certain requirements, like data protection standards and protocols, ensures that data are anonymized and aggregated when analyzed, robust security measures are used and are in place, so to protect from unauthorized access to data. And this point about students, I thought to bring it to life by sharing what one of our students said in the several interviews we did. They said that it's nice to know, at least, that although it is distance learning, we are not completely unmonitored and left in the dark. So they can see the value of those systems, especially if they are studying from a distance. And my last 2 points, predictive analytics is a unique pedagogical and technological innovation that has the capacity to empower teachers, enable them to know what each individual student is doing at any given time, how they are progressing, and how and when to support them in order to succeed. How else could a teacher know what each student is doing, especially if they teach online and they never see or get to meet a student? Yes, they could use their intuition and expertise, but how accurate would this be when you have to deal, let's say, with hundreds of students, or when a student's personal situation or condition unexpectedly changes? And here we may be talking about facing financial difficulties, or having a loss in their family, or any other issues that could make even a well-performing student stop performing well. Here I want to share what one of our teachers used to say. I feel that I am on top of what my students are doing. So you can see the control and ownership teachers can have when those tools are given to them. So predictive analytics are not to replace teachers. They are to complement the teaching practice. They can provide them with insights and information that can inform their decisions that they would otherwise not be able to access or see. The final decision as to how to respond to those predictions, even when they are wrong, is up to people. They are the ones to make the decision of how best to support the students. Predictive analytics is a call to action before a student fails, and is the teacher that can change any negative predictions. And my very last point, which I will use to conclude this argument, is that predictive analytics help us achieve a vision in education, and this has to do with equity in education. They enable us to provide support and scaffolding to those who need it the moment they need it the most. Imagine a student shown as at risk, let's say at week 10 of an online or face-to-face course. How could a teacher know about it, especially if there are no clues that the student is not performing well? So with predictive analytics, the teacher can tell and react to give support the moment the student is struggling. Not before, not after, not to all of the students, to the student that needs it the more. And here I want to share one of our latest studies by my colleague here, Martin, that shows that those systems, when they are accessed by teachers, are of particular benefit to students from low socioeconomic statuses and students from minority groups. So those students can benefit the most when the teachers are actually using the systems, and they have better learning outcomes. So predictive analytics are not only empowering teachers, but also learners. Each and all of the learners, especially those who are less likely to succeed, or they do not see themselves as being able to succeed. Predictive analytics is one of the few technologies that can meet the vision of an equitable and socially just education and to extend society. Thank you.
So for those who are online, we can see that you're getting good questions. Sorry, we have these online pictures of our online mics. Please keep posting your comments, questions. And please also vote which questions you think we should address first. And I think currently David Faulkner's question is leading first. But keep voting, keep posting new questions. Right. Caitlin.
All right. It's hard to follow these two, honestly. But let me make a few points that I think hopefully speak to some of what Thea said, which is that I think that some of the stuff that we really need to consider is the sort of, I guess, cascading effects of predictive analytics and who is getting to decide sort of the regulatory part of it, right? So predictive models are built on statistical regularities. They're not causal in nature, so we can kind of assume what the best choices are based on theory and some of the...
Let's turn off. Thank you for letting us know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Time was paused.
So we can kind of assume some relationships through these predictive models, but they're not causal. So what do we actually do in these cases? So a central assumption that we're making is that we know what the ideal behavior is. So if we have a model that's making a prediction or a detection, affective state, in my case, mind wandering, we have an idea that we can intervene, we know what to do, we know what to tell the teacher to do, or we know what to tell the student to do. But there's lots of risks to this type of control that we need to really think about, and are we making the best decision? There's risk to suppressing creativity. There's risk to suppressing outside-the-box thinking. Do we really want to build systems that regulate students at every turn? Every time they deviate from the norm, we say, oh, no, get back on track. Every time a teacher wants to do something fun and interesting in their classroom, oh, no, get back on track. And I think that, even if we do have a reasonable idea based on theory what the ideal path is, do we really want to push students to this average? Do we really want to effectively encourage people to have the same behaviors or a general range of behaviors? And I think that this really does, potentially harm the people that we want to help the most, the people who might be neurodivergent, right? And so we have neurodiversity among all of us, and we want to promote that. In educational research, we know that we want to create people who are self-regulated learners, who think in their own independent way. We want to help them problem solve and learn to do that on their own. But if we're constantly pinging them at every step of the way, how are we creating that independent learner? And the other part of this is that there's just not enough research on how to do this correctly. Do we know how often we should be giving students feedback, how often we should be intervening? Do we know how often a teacher should be getting feedback on them? To say that predictive analytics are doing more harm than good right now, that's really an open question. The research is not there to support it. And I want to kind of go back to what Thea said. Thea gave some wonderful, great examples. I think what the Open University is doing is amazing. But this is one example. We've been doing this for over a decade, and are we willing to sacrifice the bad examples for the good example? I think that's a question that we really, really have to grapple with. Another part of this is deviation from the norm. Do we want to be sort of just, what are we doing with that? Do we want to say that randomness, perturbations to a system, that's what functional systems need? They need deviations to be effective, to keep growing, and do we want to stop those deviations? We want to say they're bad all the time. The second point that I want to make is, I guess, veering a little bit into kind of making an analogy to some problems in philosophy, which is actually asking all of you to think about, what are you comfortable with in terms of harm? How do you define harm? What does harm mean to you? What are you comfortable with in terms of harm? And we know, and Thea mentioned this, we never have a 100% accurate model. So there can be bias at every single level. The way we collect the data can be biased. The way we build our model can have, we talk about explainable AI, but it's not really explainable yet. So what are the unexplainable bias that's built into our model? What is the bias that we are inserting when we're applying, how we're designing intervention, how we're perturbing students' behavior? We're saying, go to this, do that. What's the bias that we're applying from a researcher's end or a designer's end there? We really can't, it's almost, Dragon mentioned the 20 measures of bias, but there's not 20 measures at every level of bias in these systems. So what do you feel comfortable with, and where do you draw the line at harmful? How much bias are you willing to insert in that? And one option is to say, well, we can just make sure we have extremely well theoretically designed interventions that are subtle, they're not going to cause harm. But then let's go back to Dragon's example. What is the opportunity cost of investing millions of dollars in something that's pushing behavior this much? In Thea's example, with low SES students who may need that help, but if we had $5 million that we gave to the system, could we have given that $5 million for other things that are more tangible things that could also impact equity in this way? And kind of going back to this problem of how much harm are you willing to see, this is a very, very loose analogy, but let's consider the trolley problem in philosophy. So there's a train, right? If you do nothing, it will hit 5 people. If you do something, you can divert the train, but you're knowingly going to kill 1 person. And this is a loose application. Please don't, in terms of thought experiment. But if we apply some similar logic, the question is really like, how much are we willing to take deliberate action, even if we're knowingly harming 1 student or 1 person? What is the greater good that we think will weight us on this side to avoid this harm? And it's really about your tolerance of harm and what do you think your responsibility is in predictive analytics. If we say, oh, well, it's working for 95% of people, are you okay with that 5% being left out, especially if they're already from marginalized communities, especially if they're already, are we going to perpetuate that bias more? And I think this problem is like extremely important in terms of if 1 student is systematically denied an opportunity for their education, if 1 teacher is fired because of a predictive model, they lose their entire job. Just one. If 1 student develops math anxiety because we're pinging them too much in a system because we haven't thought out our intervention well enough, do you care? Is that 1 student enough for you to say that it's not worth it, or is it 2, or is it 3? Where do you draw the line? And if you're not willing to draw the line somewhere, like, how do we apply this broadly? We have an entire field, and it's not just learning analytics. It's everybody. It's industry. It's a lot of people who may not even be thinking about ethics. So where is the line? So I think this is important because we have opportunity costs in terms of resources, and where do we apply them? So I'll just leave the audience with 1 question and say, what does it mean to harm a student for you? And at this time, in 2023, have predictive analytics done enough for you to say that your tolerance is above that 1 student?
Can I stand up?
Yeah, as long as as long as the online market people can capture it, and
Okay.
I'll let you know if it doesn't work. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I think that you will agree that my colleague, Thea, very eloquently and persuasively gave numerous arguments for the counter to predictive learning analytics do more harm than good. We know that there can be bias, but predictive analytics can be accurate, they can be unbiased, and we can work toward that objective. We need absolutely to empower our teachers and learners with predictive analytics. And I also want to thank Caitlin and Dragon for outlining the exciting future of our research and the goals that we have in predictive analytics. They did a great job in the outlining and discussing the things that we need to do. So let's take a step back. Let's think about what predictive analytics are for. Well, let's think about what would your life be without them. So first of all, predictive analytics are based on human information processing. So without predictive analytics, I can't do this sitting down.
They did it to me as well.
Okay, hold it as well. Yeah.
There we go. I knew there was if there's a problem, there's a solution. Let's think about what they're for. So first of all, human information processing uses predictive analytics. You wouldn't be able to see, hear, move your body. That's how the brain works, along with the body. What are predictive analytics for? They are for simulating human information processing originally. That's one form of predictive analytics. They're also to react and enhance human capabilities. Think about that. Enhancing human capabilities. That's what they're for. Now, let's think about what you did today or this week. How many of you used your phone to find this location? Active participation. How many of you opened a Word document? How many of you use Google? So all of these things, these technologies that we have, are using and leveraging predictive analytics. Let's think about learning. Let's think about learning as a road trip. So as a road trip, in a road trip, you get in a car, you have conditions, so that's the learning environment, you have the skills and knowledge of the learner. We have all sorts of conditions. We also have vehicles. So we have things we use in order to enhance and improve education. We have destinations. We have outcomes. Well, now I want you to put yourself in a car. So imagine you're getting into a car. You get into the car and you have what? You have a gas pedal and a brake and a steering wheel. You have 3 components. You don't have a dashboard because our colleagues got rid of predictive analytics. There's no predictive analytics. There's no way to tell how fast you are going. You see a sign, it says go 65 miles an hour. But you can't tell you're going 65 miles an hour because they got rid of predictive analytics. But now think about it. What are we doing in education half the time? You take a teacher, you put him in the classroom, and you say, go 65 miles an hour. You know you're going to run out of gas, but you don't have any means of telling how much gas there is left. You know when you put gas in, but you don't know that you only have half a tank. You don't know the student has half a tank of gas because you don't have any predictive analytics. So think about that car without predictive analytics. Well, I just came from Ghana. Ghana's in Africa for everyone who isn't from the United States. It's in West Africa. So I went to Ghana. It was an ASU trip for MasterCard. And I was asked, part of this trip, some people were talking about infrastructure, about advising, and trying to help these universities to enhance their educational system. I was asked to talk about science of learning, but then it was specified I was supposed to talk about strategies for teaching large classes. And I said to them, I am the most incompetent person in the world to talk about how to teach large classes. I haven't taught a large class for 20 years. So I did my research, because that's what we do. And I talked to them, and I've tried to figure out what are their situations. You know what their situations are? I talked before going on the trip, and they described what they have. They have classrooms with 1,000 students. They don't have phones. They don't have computers, and some of them don't have chairs. What do they have? They have a projector and a microphone. They're asking, what can we do? What kinds of strategies that can we use? Well, I came up with strategies, but that's beside the point. The point is, in order to have equity, we have to provide technology, we have to provide predictive analytics to these people. Equity, social justice relies on predictive analytics. That is our road to equity and social justice. Now, Dragon very eloquently mentioned risk factors. And this is associated with universities who use predictive analytics to limit students' access, to pick out who might succeed. I am fortunate enough to be from a university, ASU, whose mission is to measure our success, not by whom it excludes, but by whom it does include and their success. And they are succeeding at this They are the number of first-generation students and Pell Grant students have quadrupled since 2002, and they are succeeding, but we're going to do better. They mentioned the problem of data sets and understanding individual differences. We are working toward that. There's lots of funding right now to create larger data sets. At your university, too, you can do that.
Thank you.
So, thank you for outlining the future.
Okay, so this is the formal part of the debate over, and now we will actually go to the first question that received most votes. And apologies again for the online people, we're trying to hold two mics at the same time. So John Kennedy wrote, if the real answer to this debate is, it depends, then what are the factors that actually indicate when we should use it? Can I first go to this side of the table, and then afterwards ask for a reaction on the other side of the table?
You go ahead.
Okay. All right. Happy to take the point.
This one is
Oh,
the
sorry.
online one.
I'm sorry.
It's very
Sorry.
confusing.
All right. My predictive modeling about the things is not working well. So the other side really make a good argument about potential benefits of the predictive models under really heavy assumptions. Moneyball. We have really very transparent models. We have really heavily sampled models. Humans, how many data points I'm seeing every time that I'm looking at you? I'm having a very dynamic model as well. I'm updating continuously about it. What we are having inside of most of higher education institutions is like my argument, if I were a predictive model, based on the current technologies that we have, Danielle's argument would be CM. Yeah, that was your argument, based on the current technologies of the predictive models, based on the amounts of and types of data that we are using. We are collecting the types of data that are minimal. Even the data that are currently used for Google Maps, it's continuously updated by thousands of people, and the predictive model is continuously being updated by all these types of data. We don't have that in education. So to actually prevent some of this harm that we are having, we have to improve, first of all, the rate of the sampling and the quality of the data that we are actually using, so that we can much better and more granularly replicate to the eloquent argument Danielle put forward at how we are as humans perceiving and also processing our environments. That's number one. Number two is also our models need to be able to be updated continuously. And so those are the two prerequisites. There could be also certain institutions, of course, which have the top leading researchers in the world in learning analytics, who are having and who are missioned by the institutions as well to do that. How many institutions in the world do we have to do that? How many institutions are committed? Even if they have some of that expertise, how many of them are doing? And what happens with those who don't? What happens with the schools who are actually having the vendors who are just selling them these predictive models as the blunt tools? What happens then? So I think that's the critical point that we need to pay attention to. So we just saw yesterday or 2 days ago, Microsoft just fired their entire AI ethics department, right? That's much about how ethics of these issues is important for the companies. So few organizations in the world will be able to do what open universities are doing, to have their own in-house team to have these predictive models and to do all these things for them. What happens with the rest of us? Okay. So I think most of us, so I want to make final point is that we really need to get to the point that perhaps we need to have some very firm ethical standards and also even potentially regulated to the certain extent that the harm can be prevented. And we don't have that. And that harm will inadvertently be happening all over again.
So you give me 3 minutes, you can have 3 minutes as well.
Well, the first point I want to make is that we are not talking about technology taking over. So we are not talking about reliance on those models and their accuracy. We are talking about people and humans being the center of this activity and using the technology to complement their practices with the knowledge that they do come with shortcomings. So this is the model we are proposing. We are not saying that predictive analytics will take over and have the last say of what we are doing and how in education. The second point I want to make is that the problem of some institutions being ahead and some others not is something we face at all different examples of educational research. I think it's a matter of those that are doing it to teach others how to do it well, and also those that have the financial capacity to provide the means to those schools, universities that cannot do it, to actually do it so they benefit all of the students. And my very last argument about standards is that ethics is a key in this discussion. We are talking about ethical applications of predictive analytics. We are talking about researchers going through ethical approval processes before they implement any of those models or use them to predict any of their students. So ethics is at the center, I would say, of how those systems should be used, are used at the moment and should be used in the future.
Do you want to do the next question? Sorry, we're multitasking here.
Thank you, Bart. So we will move to the next question, and we will do the same thing. Okay. So
Maybe give this side first
okay,
and then the other one.
perfect.
Yeah.
We'll do that. So the second question is, the use of predictive models in higher education are often grounded in a duty of care the institution has for the students. How do you balance this with the need to also uphold student autonomy? So now, Team Negative, who wants to go? Okay. I'll give you these two.
Sure, yeah.
Bart, do you have the time? Or do we
Yeah, I'm right down. Yeah. 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So one of the points that's been made has to do with ethics and the use of data, using predictive analytics and the ethics of that. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that humans are fallible. They do bad things. And it is the use of the algorithms, the predictive analytics, that we have to monitor and think about. So thinking about student autonomy and institutions that are using these data, I've been working on creating a large database at ASU called Learning at Scale. The most important concern is student privacy and how to, that's an educational priority. But here what we're talking about is student autonomy. I want to also think about the educator's autonomy, the student's autonomy, the teacher's autonomy, and the learner's autonomy, how they're using it. Predictive analytics are one side of the equation. That is the algorithm that drives the tool. The tool is the other side, the components, what you are building. Those components, what we have learned over the last 20 years is if you do not give autonomy to the students, to the educators, they will not work. If you just simply tell them what to do without choices, they generally do not work. If you're not working with the teacher, with the educators, as partners, with the students as partners, they work less well.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, let's move to the other side.
That was 3 minutes?
No, 2 minutes.
Oh.
Very fast and faster. You can just also hold it like this in your hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great question about student autonomy, and I think something that Dragon and I have talked about as we prepared for this debate is, you know, and kind of going back to the point that we talked about, which is if a system is going to make a recommendation based on statistical regularities. And so there's a really important point about what is the student's autonomy once it gets the recommendation, but also as part of the design. And I guess I would make the argument that, like, so we're debating the statement predictive analytics do more harm than good. So we're debating it in the present tense, not what it could do in the future if all of the things that we're talking about were to become true, if we have continually sampled data and so forth. So right now, there's very few examples where students have autonomy, even in the examples where we have predictive analytics and then you know, the system is actually applying it. So there are great examples, and I think everybody, you know, like for co-design, you're distracting me with your I know it's working, but I think thinking about student co-design is a really important part of this. But I don't think that you can effectively separate the analytics part from the design part. Because that's what actually makes it to the impact of students. So we're talking about bias at every level. Co-design is something that's really important. But the co-design process could also have bias in it. What if you get a neurotypical student and you're designing for students who are when 20% of your class is neurodivergent, right? So like there's a lot of things that we have to think about here in terms of student autonomy and making sure that we don't get to a point where we're just pinging them and telling them what to do with the ideal path without input at every level. And I think that your points are really well taken, but I think in terms of where we're at now, I don't think there's a lot of examples where student autonomy is the priority here. No, we didn't get to respond earlier.
No. Play by the rules.
Yeah, equitable debating.
Well, in debating, you can allow
But we didn't get to
response if they say something about what you
Online,
said.
they can't hear you anyway, so.
That's a pretty cool.
Okay.
So now we move to the next question before this heats up more. So the next question is, how do you deal with the human tendency of treating predictive models as oracles instead of failable pieces of technology? And in this case, we will give affirmative first and then negative or opposing next.
Thanks for the question. Are you part of our team? I really appreciate it. Look, I think that's one of the key things. We all know that in our many institutions as well, we have many processes. All of a sudden we say, it's just a piece of technology. Don't worry, it won't change anything. Does it? The moment you have a system based on which you need to justify any decision, why you are deviating from what the model is telling you, most of people have a tendency not to deviate from that. Most of people don't want to go through a trouble. We have these examples as well in cheating. When you find the students are a little cheating, you have a very hefty procedure that you need to follow now to report a cheating process. I heard from many colleagues they don't do that because it's a lot of administration to trouble with. That's number one. Number two example is as well, many cases you need to really do lots of things inside of our institutions. And in many of these cases, you really just see the norm and you have, I have all these ideas, but I now need to do all these things? No, thank you. I'm gonna just comply. There's also lots of research in social psychology which says the extent to which our environment is actually shaping our behaviors. There were studies showing that people walking through the hallways in which they had photos and paintings of the old people, they would actually slow down in comparison to the people who would not have these paintings inside the buildings. Therefore, in similar case as well, we can see that these predictive models are offering these type of things. I'm quite open to the research to see how we can create the predictive models that are not subverting the autonomy that our educators and learners may have in certain situations, but I fear that in most of cases, outside of these idealistic and idealized environments where we are talking in certain cushioned places where these things potentially happen, how we can explain that to the teacher who was fired because of the predictive model.
Okay, 2 minutes.
This one and this one.
Thank you. Well, these were great assumptions, but I'm going to talk using evidence. And yes, they may be coming by the Open University in the UK, but have in mind that this is the oldest Open University in the world with 200,000 students, and it's natural to be ahead of the game because of the context within which we are acting. So first I want to say that this idea of self-fulfilling prophecy, that's what our teachers were coming to us 6-7 years ago saying, that I will see the predictions and eventually my student is going to fail. We've seen teachers' perceptions changing after they understood the purpose and the benefits behind those systems. So why you are designing those systems? The purpose is for you to change the prediction. So they have the agency and autonomy to change the prediction. They are the actors that will decide whether a student is going to fail or pass. So they have the power to help the student, give them extra support, give them an extension in order to pass their course. So the autonomy for the teacher is there. Now the autonomy for the student, there are not many studies available giving students actual data. But the preliminary data, at least from what we did with students, it shows that they have no problem with this kind of predictions being made. They don't feel threatened. They don't see their autonomy being threatened or minimized in any ways. On the contrary, what they want to see is not just data, they want an exit plan. So they want the data plus a way of how they can succeed. And this way can either come from their teachers by giving the support or from the system itself through, let's say, ways that they can study in order to pass a course or an assignment. Thank you.
So like in a court case, we will give the audience the opportunity to make the final vote in a minute. So both sides have 1 minute to make the final convincing winning argument. So who do we want to give that to? Shall I just give you?
Just one.
One of you. Just take this one. Just take this one.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
1 minute.
I'll try to do dragon justice here. So we are not debating if predictive analytics are the future. We are debating whether they are doing more harm than good right now. So I would ask you again, do you think they're doing more harm than good right now? Do you think the 1 or 2 examples that we hold on to as doing really great, as institutional examples, there's also many studies that are doing great, even our own research, but are they doing more harm than good right now? Are the students that are being systematically left out, or are the teachers that are being fired, the examples that we gave? There's many examples of this. Are they doing more harm than good right now across the world? That's the question I would leave with you, because we're not debating the future, we're debating right now.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
1 minute.
So the question is, do predictive analytics do more harm than good now? I strongly disagree with my colleague Caitlin. We are not just talking about one case, one institution that's using predictive analytics. We're talking about digital learning platforms. I see Steve Ritter right there. He has created a platform called Mathia based on research, 20 years of research. They use predictive analytics. They have had enormous success and enormous impact on students. There are digital learning platforms, there are institutions, there are so many tools we use on a daily basis that use predictive analytics. The notion of autonomy. Autonomy isn't just using data. Autonomy is having choices. How many of you are creating tools that use predictive analytics? Raise your hand.
Oh, it's not just the OU. Oh, that's
Oh,
surprising.
oh, that's interesting. Okay, and so keep your hands up. Oh, no.
That was lovely.
I get
By the rules, Danielle.
There are no rules in love and war.
Have this one.
Take.
But okay. Okay. So having heard that, we will see how the debate actually. Okay. 1 sec. There. Okay. Let me see. Uh-oh. One question, Bart, how do I update and use the same one?
I feel like we need to
Oh.
count at the end that we all do predictive analytics.
How do I update? Anyone has used? Top right? Sorry about that. Got traveling like.
And it's so useful to have a managed result.
There you are.
Reset result on this
Thank you,
slide.
everyone. Sorry
It's
for
a Spanish keyboard, hooray.
there we are. Okay, now that give you more time to think about your new answer. Also, so we will present, what's going on already? Okay. Oh, interesting. Oh. But do you want to run a face-to-face one?
Who thinks that predictive analytics does more harm than good? So it's basically on this side of the equation. I think we won a couple of votes. 12, 13, yeah. Who thinks that this team has won?
Wait, that's a different question.
So thank you very much, and a warm applause to the amazing debaters. Well done. I think that the Oscars were already given, but I think we should definitely go next year again, because you did an amazing acting job. There are really a lot of questions still in WUVA. After the coffee break, we will continue with those questions. So if you're interested to continue to hear from these amazing speakers and they can put off their mask and show them real selves, we will do that after that. So thank you very much and enjoy your coffee, and thanks all for your participation.